What is up, brothers and sisters? Welcome to the Mitch Gray Show. We are visiting with Jen McFarland today. Jen is the founder and owner of Women Conquer Business. Jen, welcome to the Mitch Gray Show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we had a great time chatting before. That's one of my favorite times with the guests, to be honest, is before and after the show, right? Get to bounce things off, actually get to know each other because I've never met any of these people in person usually.
I love that part too. When I had my show going, it was like sometimes I just wish we could have taken the pre-show
Yeah.
and put that out because sometimes that's where all the gold is. So, but I've saved up a lot for you. Don't worry about
You've
it.
saved
I'm
up
here.
some. You didn't spill all the dice at one time, huh? That's good to hear.
Nope.
Good to hear. Jen, I love. We're going to kind of get to what you do here in a little bit, but you're a self-described empathetic tech translator. And when I read that, when we first talked about having you on the show, and I read that, I was like, okay, no matter what else is said, if that's all we say is define an empathetic tech translator, we'll have done something good for someone. So tell the people, what is an empathetic tech translator?
One of the biggest things that my clients always say about me is that I'm super grounded. And that's kind of funny because I'm also kind of a goofball. But in my regular life, I like dad jokes and things like that. But when I'm working with people, technology can be really stressful.
Mm.
And when I was working in the corporate world on City of Portland, huge projects that affected like millions of people, sometimes they just needed someone to say, okay, this is just what we want it to do. And if somebody can just hear you out, whether you understand technology or not, a lot of technology is about making a vision come true. That's really what the beauty of technology can be. That's why so many people think it's magic.
Yeah, yeah.
But what you need in the beginning is somebody to say, just tell me what you want to do. I'll see if I can make it happen for you. And that's the essence of what an empathetic tech translator is. It's not stopping the person and saying, well, you didn't use the right word. It's not explaining what technology is and what it can do. It's actually listening to the vision and then taking it back and either working on it yourself or working with another person who will be implementing it. So it's really just translating what somebody wants into a technical paradigm. And that can be really difficult. There are a lot of people who are either super techie and they can't make that connection back to someone, or there are people who are just visionaries and you can never quite get them, grounded in that place. My special skill is that I'm able to capture the essence of what that vision is and help put that into action for people. And I've seen a lot of really cool results, like, whether it was in the big corporate world or now when I work with small businesses.
Yeah, there's an artistry to it, right? It's like anything else in life, and kind of one of my sayings in 2020 moving into 2021 has become business is art. And so often we forget, it's almost like we've pulled the humanity out of business and out of tech and out of all these things. But we forget we're still dealing with humans who have their likes and dislikes. And when we talk tech, for me personally, and I think a lot of people, it's like, oh, yeah, the person in the room that doesn't like to talk to anyone who basically says, well, what you need to do is this. And then you're left going, I have no idea what I was just told that I need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of times, because it's so stressful for people, it's about kind of dismantling that. And before answering the question about yes or no, or can do or can't do, it's about hearing that person out. So that then if there's something in the beginning that says, well, that's a no-go,
Yeah,
maybe there's
right.
something downstream and you can start making those trade-offs. And a lot of times people are willing to get parts of what their vision is so that they can build into something and lean into it. But too often, it goes two different ways. One time, a lot of times the techie people aren't involved early enough. So everybody's
Mm,
so far
mm.
downstream that it's like, well, no, we have to do it. The other part is, like I said, the techie person stops and says, nope, it's a no-go without even listening and understanding. And then the
Yeah.
third dimension of that can be when somebody understands a system or how all the pieces are connected together, and they actually can open up new possibilities that even know existed. And that's really where kind of the magic is where you can somehow make things simpler or easier for somebody and they hadn't even considered it because there's that education gap, and
Right.
that's really another spot that I just absolutely love. And I think that's why people think of it as magical. And I don't necessarily think of it as magical. I see it as like, well, you just kind of hook everything together and it works.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people it's magic. But the bottom line is I feel like we do automation and we do all of these things so we free up space so that we can be more human. Because I would really, I work in technology, but I'd rather talk to you.
Right.
That's more
Right. Yeah.
interesting,
Right.
than sitting and looking at the back end of, Active Campaign or HubSpot or
Yeah.
WordPress or whatever. So it is kind of what makes me different is that I have kind of these two sides, and it is an art and a science. Like
Yes.
it is both. And I think that many people could say that about their discipline or their
Mhm.
industry is it because we're human, it has to have both sides. And when
Yes.
it becomes too dry, then people just have no interest in what you're doing, and they kind of cast it off to the side. And that's what happens a lot with operations and tech and all that back end part of your business.
Yeah, it's like the old saying, too much of anything is not a good thing. And that's kind of what you're alluding to. And it's almost like, yeah, technology has been a great vehicle, right? I mean, we're sitting here, you're in Oregon, I'm in New Mexico, and we're conversing like we've known each other for 15 years, and it's awesome and fun, and it's been a lifesaver, especially over the last year during the pandemic. But at the same time, when you do pull all of that humanity out of it, then it becomes lifeless. I mean, the human spirit is really what gives those type of vehicles the life that they have. And when we too often forget that, that's when a lot of our issues kind of come about. So I want to come back to that in a little bit. I know we're going to talk about a subject that you and I both enjoy, and I want to come back to that idea. Women Conquer Business, digital marketing operations consultancy, and your focus is on entrepreneurs and small businesses. Tell us real quickly a little bit more about your company, why you started it, how you're surviving. I guess it's happening still. Like
It's
that's the
still
big
here.
question.
you know
Right.
Yeah, it's a boutique marketing operations consultancy. I also have a master's degree in leadership, so everything comes with leadership and ownership. And really, it's about that handoff and helping people
Yeah.
champion their initiatives and saying, okay, well, here's how we can do it on the back end, mapping it out for people, and then helping them take control, hand off the reins. So
Right.
it's a little bit different where I'm going in and looking at the whole landscape of what people are doing. Oftentimes it does focus on marketing, it doesn't have to, but anymore, like almost everything comes in to
Yes.
play,
Yes.
especially now since the pandemic. I'm working on a digital marketing model that actually is centered around payments, because now everybody has to do e-commerce in one way
Mhm.
or another. So now it's like, okay, well, payments become the center of like the e-commerce universe and the digital marketing universe. So then what do we need, to make
Right.
all of that
Right.
happen? We're going through this really transformative time. So what I do in my consultancy is help people see the landscape of everything that they have, the things that they can take out, a little dash of what needs to be
Yes.
added, and then having it run as smoothly as possible given the industry, the number of years in business, 3 to 5 year business goals.
Right.
We try to tie everything into like your broader strategy, get people out of the tasks and the kind of the
Mhm.
hamster wheel of
Mhm.
just going through and chugging along, because oftentimes people are okay, or maybe they don't know that they're doing all this, repetitive data entry or doing all of these things that really take them away from the whole reason why they started their business in the first place. So it is kind of a bigger question, a bigger thing that we're trying to achieve here, which is helping people get more freedom in their business by straightening out the back end of their business.
Yeah. Have you seen a difference? Let's talk barriers for a second. So I think there's the obvious barriers, especially when it comes to technology, whether it's knowledge or willingness or lack of capacity. You're especially dealing with small businesses, entrepreneurs. I mean, there's a lot of capacity issues there. It's oftentimes maybe 1 to 10 people doing the work of 100 people, especially if a company is scaling. So have you noticed the difference in the barriers pre-pandemic versus during pandemic? And what have those barriers looked like, if they've changed at all, or has it just been kind of a shift of issues?
I think it's more of a shift of issues.
Yeah.
I think that what we're seeing at the beginning of the pandemic, some people were like, "Well, I'm just going to write it out. I'll maybe sit this out for a while
Mm.
and see what happens. I'm not going to
It's like they're
change
going to check out.
operationally."
I'm going to check out for
Yeah,
3 months and then come back.
and then come back.
Yeah.
And then when that didn't happen, now
Yeah.
what we're seeing are all of these people who are like, "Okay, I can't hang back anymore." And they're jumping in, and it's great because what we're seeing is a lot of imperfect action, which is really when it
Yes.
comes to your operations and your business, that's what this whole thing is about. Like, you try something for a while and you're like,
Yes.
"Yeah, this isn't really working, so I need to do a different thing." But when it comes to like showing up online, for some people that is a really big deal, and
Yeah.
I honor that and I understand that. And what the pandemic did was it said, "Well, you're gonna have to show up online now. Boom, this is happening."
Right.
And it's shaken up a lot of industries. I've spoken to some restaurant groups recently about,
Mhm.
how we can kind of, make some changes and some shifts for them because their industry has been suffering so much. And yet, people want to order from local businesses. At least they do here in Portland,
Right.
Oregon. And I think there are
Right.
a lot of other places where that's the case as well. So there are a lot of things that people can do. It's about that willingness to kind of open up and explore
Mhm.
the possibilities. What they've said in the broader sense, like if we're going to be, nerdy leaders for a second, is that digital transformation is sped up by 5 years since the
Ah.
pandemic.
Ah.
So that means that, like, whether you're at scale in a large corporation or a small business, all of those things that you thought would be nice to have,
Are
suddenly you have to
must-haves.
have it
Yes, they're
now. Yeah.
must-haves. Yep. Yep.
So what we're seeing in terms of a shift, I think, are more people stepping into the leadership or the being champion of these different initiatives within their business because now they have to. And isn't that the case? Isn't there a quote somewhere that's like, change happens when it's too painful to stay where you were? I mean,
Yeah.
that's really what we're running into right
Right.
now. Is it's like too painful. We have to make money and we have to get customers.
Yeah.
Everyone is locked away, or for the most part locked away in their homes until we get herd immunity or whatever's going to happen, and suddenly we can hug people again.
Yeah.
and and so as long as that's going on, we have to find ways to reach out to people, get new clients, make it as easy as possible for people to buy from us, and not lose our sanity or our humanity.
Yeah, I love that. Not lose our sanity or humanity, either one. And it's like a fine line, right? We're walking this tightrope that it's like on one day or the next, I may lose one or the other. You never know.
Hey, some days you may lose both, and
Both
that's
of
when you
them,
go
yeah.
and, like, pet your dog, or go for a walk so that you can
Right.
come back to it later.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I think I would 100% agree. I think it has just been this shift in perspective. I'll never forget a company that I was working with when this very first happened. So last March, they did like all the other companies did, kind of shut down for 3 weeks to a month, and then it was an auto group, and so then they started bringing people back. And I connected with the owner and I said, "Here's the deal. I'm going to adopt this saying, and I want to share it with you first because people are going to have to get this. Innovators are going to thrive during this season and after this season. The traditionalists will not survive this. They just won't." And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You're going to have to find a new way of doing business. What you've done with your auto group the last 25 years is not going to work any longer. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. So to survive this season and then to thrive in the next season, it's going to take innovation because the services you're going to add that you are not used to adding, and if you keep them after all of this, and the restaurant world to me is a prime example. How many restaurants have you seen, at least in my part of the country, where they're building these new outdoor, like I know multiple restaurants that have doubled their size capacity only because they've built outdoor dining. And now they can
Absolutely.
keep it, now they didn't have that before. And so the people that were innovative and kind of accepted all this, and you see it, I know multiple small businesses that are quadrupling in size during a pandemic, and it's totally related to what you just pointed out.
Absolutely. And the longer this goes on, and to your point of what you just said, the longer this goes on, the more these things are becoming permanent disruptors. Like in the
Yes,
beginning, it
yes.
was like, well,
It was an
who knows how long
inconvenience in the
it's gonna
beginning, right? It was like,
last. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But now, like for a dealership, you've got to go online, or you
Mhm.
have to find. Everybody's had kind of a crummy online buy a car experience from a
Right.
local. Now it's about like, okay, how are they doing it in other places,
Yeah.
and how can we then extend our services in a way based on customer expectations. I mean,
Yes.
the consumers have new expectations now,
And
and
by
the
the
people
way,
who are
they're
going to
not
meet
going
them.
away. Those expectations
Oh
are not going to
no.
go away. They're not.
No, because the trends were already there.
Yes.
The trends
Yes.
were already there, and now it's like the chart, instead of this gradual, like frog in the boiling water scenario.
Right.
Now it's suddenly like, ah, the water is real
Yeah.
hot, and we're not turning the oven off
Yeah.
as consumers. And I think that what really helps business owners or leaders is to look at what their favorite experiences are
Mm,
in the world,
mm,
so that then they can begin to adopt those and replicate that. Because if you can take yourself out and look at your business from your customer's perspective, or
mm.
prospective customer's perspective, even for just a minute, sometimes that's really eye-opening.
Yes.
And then you can kind of open the doors to the possibility of what's going on. And I think the first step oftentimes is, what is it that I like? What websites do I like to go to? What are the online shopping experiences that I have that have been so easy that I'm like, I'm just going to buy from them forever? And
Right.
sometimes that's the door that can open and really change things for people, is kind of like looking at the world through a different perspective.
That ties directly back to your word empathetic, right? Because that's really the sheer essence of empathy is where do I like to shop? What connects with me? And how does that relate to the customer base that I'm dealing with? And it's really Donald Miller's adage, the customer is the hero, the business owner isn't the hero, the hero is the customer. Because without those clients, without those customers, you can have an all-star team, you can have the greatest product in the world, but you're not going to move them. It's not going to go anywhere without treating the customer in a way that is full of empathy and compassion and understanding. And I, while I do know there are a ton of businesses out there that get that, there are still far too many that don't. It's like, and you know it right away, right? You know when you try and return an article of clothing that you just purchased and you get, preached at for 15 minutes about how inconvenient that is. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to shop here anymore.
Yeah, and what we're finding is that it's even more. I mean, now it's like, don't argue with them at all.
No, it's
Like,
amplified by a
it's
million
amplified.
now. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think a lot of that, I was having a conversation with a business owner last week where she was like, I just don't have time for all of this extra work I'm having to do. And I
Mm,
think that as consumers we feel that way, and I think as business
mhm.
owners we feel that way. And I think a lot of it is that it's stressful. It's stressful
Yes.
to go to the store right now. If you have children, like, are they going to school 3 days a week? Which 3 days is it? Are they, everything has this like really heightened sense of whether it's fear or having to organize or
Mm,
both. And everything is like upside down. So sometimes you just want things to be easy.
right.
And
Well, then
and
that's what
that's
we were
and that's
used
what's
to.
happening.
That's what
Yeah.
we were used to. Convenience was king. I mean, for especially for us in America, it was like everything was convenient. Everything was convenient. And as soon as those conveniences got pushed off the cliff, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know
Yeah.
what to do. We don't know how to function. And so, yeah, it's incredible. What's been as you've been talking to business leaders, what's kind of been the biggest barrier there? I know we talked about barriers regarding technology earlier, but there's been this shift, and we've both seen it in talking with business leaders from a year ago to now. What would you say has kind of been that biggest barrier and challenge for people in leadership positions?
I think that's really, I mean, my head is just swimming with all these different ideas. I really think it has to do with the stress of an overwhelm that it can be, that you feel this pressure that you need to make the right decision in
Mm,
a time of tremendous uncertainty.
yeah.
Meaning we don't know what tomorrow will bring. So how can I possibly make this life-changing or business-shifting decision if I have no idea? And the truth is, we've lived in this volatile, uncertain world for a very long time, and we just kind of accept it. But right now, because everything is so strange, and it has been for a year,
Right.
and we've been mentally tired and overwhelmed all the time because now, like, going to the grocery store requires, like, a business plan or something. So
Right.
what happens is, we just wear out a lot quicker, and then you're like, "Should I pay that bill
Mm-hmm.
now?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, you find this,
Mm-hmm.
like, mental tiredness around the mundane,
Yes.
and then when you think about it in terms of, "Do I wanna spend thousands of dollars on this thing when," I mean, there's so much going on in the world.
Yeah.
I think that there's this paralysis around that, and yet it's really the time to kinda just jump in the stream and float along and do the best that you can, because the longer that we wait, it just prolongs or makes it harder to swim and catch up.
Yeah, the worst thing we can become is paralyzed, right? It's that's something I've believed in. Gosh, I guess since I was a kid. I don't know if I heard it somewhere or what, but somewhere early in my life, that kind of got ingrained in me. Where the worst thing that can take place is inaction, being paralyzed, not doing anything. And I think you're right. I think we do see that in not just leaders, but in individuals. Period. It's like you said, do we wait this out? What do we do? Where do we go? And it's like, just do something. Like, and the crazy thing is, now's the great time to take a massive risk because no one's really expecting a whole lot. Like, it's just do something really. I told someone that the other day. I was like, what's something that you could do that would just set your soul on fire? That it may be the most crazy thing you would think about doing, but just take action on that. And he was kind of like, wow, that actually makes a lot of sense. I'm like, I know, because right now it feels like no one's soul is on fire. We're just kind of waiting complacently.
Absolutely, and I think that a lot of people get caught up in, time and money, but there's, like, this value, right? You can do
Yes.
things that don't cost a lot of time or money. It's about having that, like, creative time to unlock, right before this interview, actually, I was like, I just need to bliss out for a minute, and I
Yeah.
just listened to this, like, chakra balancing music. I know it sounds like super woo woo or something, but it's like, it's not the news, it's not social
Yes.
media, it's
Yes.
not any of these other things. The
Yes.
music doesn't have any words, so I'm not getting, like, caught up in anything. And I don't know if my chakras are balanced, but, like, it feels good to listen to it.
Right.
And so what I think a lot of people don't take that time, whether
Yeah.
it's, meditating or running or, whatever it is, kind of step back, take a pause, and then really dive in. Because if we don't take these time outs, we don't spend some time with ourselves, but not engaged in something else, then it's really hard to lead. It's really hard to recharge your batteries
Mhm.
if we're just, like, sitting in the stew all the time, if that makes sense.
No, yeah,
And right now, everything is super hot, so you
yes,
gotta take some
yes.
time out.
Yeah, the latest data I've read is like mental health issues are up by like 64%. In fact, I was on a Clubhouse call 2 weeks ago, and it was kind of a bunch of coaches that we got together. I was actually invited to be on it, and it was really cool because the topic was burnout, and one of the questions that was asked by someone in the room was about mental health, and that's some interesting data to read right now. I think it does show a real picture of the complacency we're talking about, the isolation that people are feeling right now. But what's interesting to me is, as I've been in leadership positions in my life, especially in my days in ministry, heaven forbid that a leader has burnout or depression or like, leaders can't be vulnerable that way, right? And so when we're talking, if 64% of people are expressing mental issues,
Hmm.
a large capacity of those have to be people in leadership positions, because we know, as you've just well painted the picture, those leadership positions are in high pressure moments. But no one wants to deal with that. It's like, when are we going to, even though we've done a better job at dealing with it, when are we really going to deal with it is the question. And I think you're kind of alluding to some things there about what it takes to be a leader, about what it's taking to be a leader in this moment in time. And I think one of those things that's going to take leadership to the next level is vulnerability.
Hmm.
Like, do those people have others to lean on? How can we create environments where it's okay for a leader to go, I suck today, and we still have to make some big decisions. I need some help. Yeah, are you seeing anything? And it may not be leaders saying that specifically, but just those signs of that burnout and of that frustration and those challenges that people are facing as you're working with those leaders.
It's interesting that this is one of the reasons why I say take a step back from social media.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you look closely at social media, you're going to start to see the cracks in the veneer of
Yes.
people.
Yes.
You're not seeing as plastic and fake. There's like it slips in there, but
Mm.
there are a lot of people who are still, operating as if everything is fine. And I think we're starting to see people say, this is not fine.
Right.
This hasn't been
Right.
fine for a year. This
Right.
is very difficult. And it's starting to happen. I think too that look, I'm grateful every day that I have a husband at home with me, two dogs. You were talking before we started about your family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot about, you know, one of my besties who's like three doors down, who doesn't have a partner, doesn't have, you know, people living in the house with her, so she's part of our bubble, but we're not together every day. And then I think about all of the other people who are in much more stressful situations than myself. And I think there have to be a lot of leaders in those
Yes.
households too that are
Yes.
living in a much more difficult situation than me. And I feel like what we need to do is make sure that we have these groups and these places where we can have some very real conversations. Professionally, I have a few groups where we're networking, and it's not the veneer is totally down. It's more around
Right.
like helping each other build our businesses, and talking about what's really going on. This fall, I lost my father very suddenly.
Mm.
He passed away. It wasn't from COVID, but I had talked to him an hour before and
Mm.
everything was fine, and then he's gone. And you can't go through that. We've lost, you know,
Almost 500,000
how
people.
yeah, half a
Yeah.
million people
Yeah.
in this country, in addition to people like my father who died of heart disease and all the people who are dying of cancer and everything. We're going through this tremendous period of loss and grieving. It's not normal, and we have to start
Right.
talking about that and having
Right.
really honest dialogues about it. And I think that as leaders, we need to find other people. We also need to realize in our remote teams that we have to let go of some things and allow our teams to take on more responsibility, because that's what's going to take the pressure off of ourselves so that we can continue to elevate our business and innovate. If we're down in the weeds all the time, not thinking about the broader vision, boy, it's really hard. It's really hard to innovate. And right now, the weeds don't necessarily look super pretty. There's a lot
Right.
of tending in the
Right.
weeds right now.
Yeah.
So we need to spend that time, whether it's, personal time to kind of clear the brain space. And then also setting aside time in our businesses where we're just not in it. We're just thinking and visioning. And I think that that's what we need. And then the third dimension of that is also some sort of conversations that you can have that will allow you to blow off steam when you're having a bad mental health day, or reaching out and finding a mental health provider who can help you through this. And then having people that you can talk to and be around, whether it's virtual or in person.
You just alluded to something that I don't remember where I was having the conversation, but we were having a similar conversation, and you used the word grieving, and the notion was brought up that we're going through this as a world. It's not just America going through this. There's 500,000 people that have been killed by COVID in America, worldwide. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's unfortunate how many. And most people we're not taking the time as a community to really sit with that, and to really, what I like to call, sit in the ashes of what that grievance looks like. And what history tells us is when you don't stop to grieve and to appreciate, that comes back to haunt you in one form or fashion. And I think you're exactly right. I think there's a value. And to me, the greatest way we can do that is if someone is listening and they're running a business, or they're just a leader in their family, or whatever that is. I think it's us in small segments taking that time to grieve, taking that time to acknowledge, and that collective energy will actually do a lot of redemptive work on the mistakes that we've made and on the things that we've not acknowledged. Because, that in the end, there have been some beautiful things that have happened this past year. Culturally, there have been some things that, because of the magnification inspired by COVID-19, it has brought to light some issues and some opportunities for us to deal with things. But we still have a lot to deal with. And that can become super overwhelming. But again, I think where it starts is that leader who's running a small business, or that department manager, or that mom or dad, or that coach, or that friend next door, inviting that conversation to take place. And I love, first of all, my heart to you for your dad. But I really do admire and love that you use the word grieve, because we don't use that enough, right? We just, it's a number, it happened, it's an activity, we move on and we go forward. And when you don't ever grieve things and kind of sit with that in that moment, the healing doesn't take place. It's impossible for it to take place if that doesn't, you don't partake in that grieving.
Absolutely. And it doesn't need to be grieving death. One of the things that we don't talk about is, like, if you fail, you need to reflect and you need to grieve that failure.
Yes.
So, and that grief is where you find those opportunities to change and do something new. And and I have this problem myself. I'm a hard charger. Like, I like to go on to the next thing. That's just how I work,
Yeah.
But I have to tell myself, nope, we need to celebrate this win.
Yes.
We need to grieve. We need to grieve this loss, and one of the reasons in my blog I talk about, like, gratitude and leadership all the time is because I feel like we all need to remind ourselves of, like, all of the great things that are going on. And then it does make space for those little times of grief. Like, we don't need to sit in it forever, but acknowledging it is what allows us to move things forward. It's not just all of the wins. It's having an acknowledgement and a relationship with loss that is healthy, so that we can then move things forward. And I think part of what keeps a team going is this, like, genuine, authentic gratitude. And you can have gratitude for things that have gone wrong. And you can be grateful for the people on the team that make mistakes, especially if it opens something up, and even if it doesn't, because there's always a treasure in there. And that's one of the things that really grieving and reflecting on what's been lost, whether it's in your business or in your life or both, that's where you're going to find the treasure. It's not in being like, well, we made it through Tuesday.
Right.
That's not necessarily going to do it, but taking that time to really reflect on things and share that the blessings or the gratitude, what you have to be thankful for. That's what's really going to help you move things forward.
Yeah, celebrating success, celebrating wins. I am right there with you. I'm terrible at it. I'm just terrible at it. Years ago, I had a therapist who told me, Mitch, you have to stop and celebrate things. And I'm like, why? I have so much more to accomplish. I have to keep. She's like, no, you have to stop and celebrate. And really, it's the counterbalance, right? Learning to celebrate the good and learning to grieve when things don't work out is actually one and the same. It's one and the same type of work. And I totally am right there with you. But we just, and the perfect example of this, oddly enough, is after a sports event, especially if it's a major sports event, and they're interviewing, like you saw it in the National Football League a few weeks ago. Both teams won their conference championship. They're headed to the Super Bowl. And what's the question the interviewer asks? Well, what do you think about getting to the Super Bowl? And the players are like, we just want to celebrate this. We're not even worried about that yet. But that's kind of the epitome of our culture, right? It's like move on to the next. And I really believe that's actually stemmed from a fear of sitting and being fully present in the moment. Because that is such a vulnerable thing to do. And we don't like looking at the shadow, right? We don't like dealing with that. And I think in leadership, it's even more pivotal. It's even more pivotal to be able to sit in each and every moment.
Boy, and it is hard. I mean, that is like upper level leadership is being able to sit and be mindful all the time, and I've talked to some pretty cool people about that radical acceptance of what is, there's Patricia Thompson's been on my podcast a couple times because I just love her groundedness and how in her work with leaders, she's just like, okay, have you taken some time? And they're like, I don't do any of that meditation junk, or I don't do, like it's all this,
Yep.
and then when they spend the time to sit with themselves, that is when things start to open up.
Yes.
And I can say that that's true of myself. I took a lot of time off in the fall. Like my whole family was upside down.
Right.
And all of a sudden I was like, I could do this with my business, or I could do that, and I'm not even thinking about my business because I've got like these big family issues I'm dealing with, but it was space.
Yes.
And I think that we have opportunities to create space anytime, not just when there's a big tragedy.
Right.
And I think it was like an eye-opening thing for me, which was like, okay, I got to rest more. I have to take some time away. I got to listen to my chakra balancing music or whatever it is, and it helps to do that. And I think that there's this way that we can do, like, I mean, I don't even know if this is a thing, but like kind of an active rest where like you're not just like a blob in front of the TV, but you can be like resting and enjoying and like kind of blissing out, and then things will come to help you.
One of my favorite people to read is Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, and he basically, in my words, he basically talks about how everything can become meditation. And so he talks often about walking meditation, and he talks often about when you're eating food, eat it slow, remember, be appreciative of what it took to have that food, et cetera, et cetera. And really that's exactly what he's inviting people to do, is that every moment can be a moment of meditation if we're fully present in that moment. And when you look at that from a leadership perspective, I mean, I think back to all the years in my personal experience where I'm dealing with employees or dealing with people or dealing with clients or whatever it is, raising kids, and you start thinking about all the moments that you may have missed because you were so focused on the next moment. And it just makes you kind of stop and reflect and go, yeah, if I was could be just focused in that one moment. Easier said than done, but when you look at it from a perspective of this conversation is a form of meditation, this exercise is a form of meditation, this engagement is a form of meditation, it really shifts your perspective and your mindset going into that moment.
Absolutely. And they've done study after study saying that multitasking is a myth. Yes. There's only like 2% of humanity that can multitask. And you're not one of them. Right. Like, everybody out there who's listening and saying, well, clearly I'm in the 2%.
Yeah,
Probably not. Probably not. And I think that we all tell ourselves that we
Yeah.
can, but true mindfulness, if you find yourself saying things like, I don't know how I missed it. Well,
Ah, well,
well,
yes, you do.
were you thinking about tomorrow? Or,
Right.
or were you eating your lunch and reading the newspaper and scanning social media all at the same time? I mean, people do that stuff all the
Yeah.
time. There's real beauty in not doing that. Someone clearly doesn't have it all figured out. I'm still working on it,
Right. Right.
But these are the struggles that we have, and I think that if there's a way that we can break through on that, especially right now when we can tend toward overwhelm, I think, a lot quicker as
Mm,
leaders, as
mm.
business owners, because there's so much overwhelm in our world, in the broader world, then if we can clear some of that other clutter away, I think some of our innovative ideas will emerge, and then you gotta call one of us to help you
Right.
get
Yeah.
through it,
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, that's kind of the other
Yeah.
part is, it's not a time to take on more than what your specialty is. It's actually a time to get help with things. Before we
Yes.
started, I was saying, I'm going through a rebrand. Well, I hired somebody. I hired
Right.
people to like help me write things and help me
Right.
design things and help me get my brand um communicating more clearly, which is why when you said empathetic tech translator, like I'm like, oh, my new stuff.
Yeah.
It's out there. Um, so
Yeah.
it is a time to get those people on your side that are really going to help you shine. And now's a good time to do it.
Yeah. That makes me think of two things. Number one, you've mentioned a few times the idea of remote teams, and we talked, kind of pre-show about, for years people were talking about the power of remote teams, and most businesses, especially corporations, were like, no, no, no. Even though they were technically outsourcing to remote teams across the world. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, that idea they were so defiant against it. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, here you go. Now you have to have remote teams. What first of all, what are maybe some tips? Because I know in talking to leaders, and you and I talked about this as well before the show, leaders of businesses are being asked to operate and run things differently than they've ever done before. And I personally don't think that's going away anytime soon, even though we may open. I mean, you kind of see it with big corporations. I mean, I love watching the real estate industry, and it's amazing how many big corporations are just selling real estate off right and left because they're like, hey, if we can cut costs by two or $3 million a year and still be successful, why not? And so I don't think it's
Mhm.
going away. But what are maybe a few tips? We're talking about empathy, and we're talking about compassion, and we're talking about celebrating successes and grieving, mistakes. So what are some things that leaders could do to equip themselves with this idea of empowering their remote teams from a leadership perspective?
Well, first of all, I think it was always a myth that if you were at the office, it meant you were working. There have been a lot
Right.
of studies around this,
Yes.
how much time people actually waste. So this idea that we need to rent space and or own or build space to have people in one place, because that's where they'll work. That's a myth. Now, there are some teams that you might gel better if
Mm-hmm.
everybody's in the same room,
Mm-hmm.
and I get that. Like different industries offer different things. One of the biggest things that we can do as leaders with remote teams is put together some sort of framework around time management
Mm.
and understand that when people are home, they've got kids, they've got pets, they have maybe spouses who are also working from home. I mean,
Yes.
there's like all kinds of stuff coming and going. So it's really about communicating around time and leading through time and understanding that it, people weren't working all the time anyway. So when they were in your location, so understanding that you need to be flexible around time, be clear about the priorities, and then again, it's about like keeping things moving,
Yeah.
putting together a
Yeah.
framework around organization so that it's clear what the files are and where everybody can find everything. so that that collaboration can happen, whether you're using, something like Slack or even just like Google Drives and things like that. Like, make sure that all of that stuff is open and known so that the communication channels are open. And at the same time, don't expect technology to replace everything that you had in your office situation.
Yes.
It will be different, but you have to be open to the idea that it could be better.
Yeah.
And always be that now you have different ways and different avenues of communicating that are real time, and yet you can't expect employees to be on at like 1 a.m. and
Right.
responding to
Right.
everything.
Right.
So it's about setting up boundaries around time, about empowering your employees, or remote workers, VAs, whoever it is that you're working with. It's about empowering them to accomplish a set of tasks. And then, like, if they're babysitting on their lap and it's still happening, it's about, you know, celebrating that. This is
Yes.
about
Yes.
making sure things
Yes.
get done and it happens, and not necessarily worrying as much about the how. And I think that that's probably a forever thing that's going to start changing in some environments. The last project I worked on at the city of Portland, I led an IRS data share with the city of Portland. So it was like I was working with mucky mucks at the IRS and, people here in Portland, and we're trying to figure out how to share tax information. I can tell you that most of the people I worked with at the IRS were remote.
Mhm.
This was, gosh, at this point, that project started maybe 7 years ago. So
Wow.
at that point, IRS had said, we can't afford all these buildings with people in call centers or whatever,
Right.
and they have a very sophisticated technology program that I don't even understand that like allows some people to work remotely to save space, to save time and energy for the workforce, and it seems to be working really well. I don't see that going away. I
Mhm.
see that actually increasing and improving, but what we have to do is understand that that changes some of the dynamics of our relationships
Mhm.
with each other and like how the work needs to flow. It takes time to work the kinks out on how that works, but I think on the other side of it, it can be much more productive and really great, and it just takes time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think it's going anywhere. And, it was interesting, it was probably in April or May. I don't remember. I was talking to someone who I actually don't remember where she works, but she was complaining about how the remote issues were being handled. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, we literally have to clock in at 8 o'clock and we can't clock out until 5 o'clock. And we have to check in every hour on the hour and show certain progress on our work. And she's like, what they don't understand is I've got 3 kids I'm trying to do homework with, and I have to cook lunch and supper and breakfast. I mean, it was just one of those things that you're like, oh my gosh, can we be any more less compassionate than that? I haven't talked to her since. I would be interested to know how
Yeah.
that went. My thought is she probably ended up quitting, and so did everyone else, because it's just impossible. You can't do it.
Well, were you doing that before?
Right.
Probably
Right.
not.
But it's a
That
control
wasn't
issue. It's
reasonable.
a control issue, right? And that was the big thing from leadership perspective is it's like, let's be honest, why did they really, really want people in the office most of the time? Because it's a control thing. I can control you. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, I can't control them anymore. So what are we gonna what are we gonna do? Yeah.
Well, what I would say to the leaders there is, why did you hire these people if you can't trust them to get their work done?
Yes. Yes. And is that a reflection on the people, or is that a reflection on leadership?
It's
Is
a reflection on leadership
yes,
100%.
yes.
And I
Yeah.
think if you don't trust your employees and you want to do all of that, the good ones aren't going to stick
No.
around. The good
No.
employees don't stick around for that. They'll go
No.
someplace where they have the freedom to get the work done and meet the priorities, and you know, and not have to put up with all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
And then the bad employees are the ones who stick around because they're like, well, I'll just see what I can get away with. I can just, you know, I'll clock in and, check in every hour, and, I mean, productivity goes down in those scenarios.
And the people that are kind of the bad employees, quote, they also are complaining to their friends about how miserable the job is. And so you're getting a double whammy because they're trying to manipulate the system, not doing a very good job, and still complaining. And so now you're known as not a great place to work.
Yeah, which doesn't help you in your community or
Right.
with customers or anybody. So
Right.
it, the wheels definitely go round and round, and this is why self-awareness is so important for meditation and reflection. I mean,
Mhm.
all of that is really about building out your own self-awareness as a leader so that then you can be like, I'm really overwhelmed at work all the time. I'm overwhelmed at home. I'm trying to balance all of these things. Showing that empathy and compassion that, like, man, maybe somebody who's making less money than me and has more responsibilities than me at home, maybe it's hard for them too, and what can I do as a leader to empower them to do the best that they can and set reasonable expectations and goals?
Yeah, let's go this direction. That makes me think of a question I would really like to dig into with you as we kind of start rounding things out on the show. Let's say we have a leader that's listening to the show. Maybe they're your perfect client. They're running a small business or they're an entrepreneur or whatever, and they're sitting here listening to us talk about empathetic leadership, compassionate leadership. If they look at either one of our social media platforms and stuff, they're going to see that same stuff all the time. This is the leader that's like kind of what you said earlier. They're not really buying into the whole thing yet, right? But they know they're struggling. They know they're struggling. They know it's a challenge. What are maybe 3 tips that you would give that leader just to begin the inner reflection and the interpersonal work of considering those ideas that we've discussed?
Boy, this is hard because, some people are very resistant to it.
Yeah.
I think that where it can really start, it really does start with you as a leader. One of the basic exercises that you can do, and if you have people at home, it works really well, is you sit down, if you have breakfast or time with whoever's in your house, and you say, what are 3 things that you're grateful for? And you can't say the same 3 things every day, but
Mm.
you ask it every day. What are 3 things that you're grateful for? And that begins to get you in a different mindset around, kind of reframes the day a little bit, and it gets you in a different mindset around what the good things are in your life and in your world. When you focus on the good stuff, you start to see it everywhere.
Yes.
If you start focusing only on the negative things, then you start to see that everywhere. So one of the simplest shifts you can do is even just setting that up. And if you don't live with anybody, have like an accountability buddy that you've got to like send them an email and they have to send you an email. Something to kind of get you in that place of, every morning I need to have 3 things. They have to be 3 different things. I can't just mail it in and say,
Right.
I'm grateful for my house and for
Sleep,
food.
food, and house. Yeah,
Yeah, sleep, food, and
exactly.
house, which as someone who was in the Peace Corps, I can say that there are a lot of people in this world who don't
Yeah.
have that. So
Right.
it's not to invalidate being grateful for that. It's to say, uh, if we're fortunate enough to have that stability, then the chances are very great that you have other things that you can be
Mhm.
grateful for. And that's
Mhm.
why, like, so much as many people feel like they're in survival mode right now, there are a lot of things going on that are good.
Mhm.
So that's probably the first thing, is, you know, just setting the stage for being open to seeing the good. And that can open you up to other things. I think the other thing too is to make sure that you're taking a little bit of time out
Yeah.
out of this world of trying to solve everything. You're not going to innovate everything in your business overnight. You're not going to fix everything in one day. So what does it hurt to spend, you know 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it's going to be once a day, to just be, and
Yes.
to be mindful and present in the moment? I'm not saying you got to meditate, because if you're we may have lost you a long time ago when I said chakra balancing music. I mean, I get it. I get
First
it.
minute of the
You know,
show they turned off. Maybe they
they're
came
like
back.
empathy off, you know. Um, but I would say that the more you can learn about yourself and the more you can realize why that maybe feels uncomfortable, the better
Yes,
off you're going to
yes,
be as
yes,
a leader. Is like
yes.
sit with that discomfort a little bit. Sit with the idea that uh, failure isn't always bad. Failure sometimes is a good time to pivot into something that will actually be more difficult exercises. So you can't just be like, "Oh, done, did it, check."
Right.
These are things that we kind of have to like touch base on and think about, and integrate into our lives as much as we can so that we can be better leaders and kind of show up for other people. I think oftentimes, and I'm saying this just as a human walking the earth as well, sometimes we can get all caught up in what other people are doing. And it's really like a sense of not being aligned somewhere within
Yes.
ourselves. And so when that static starts to happen and you're starting to see stuff and have these unusual reactions, that's a good time to step back.
Hmm.
That's a good context
Hmm.
clue that it might be time to kind of, take a chill pill for a while and and understand what's going on with yourself. Because really leaders are always, reflecting out, we're projecting a lot of what's
Projecting.
going
Yes.
on
Yes.
inside and then reflecting back what our employees are giving to us.
Hmm.
So it's kind of both. So you don't want
Hmm.
that like boomerang of like
Right.
projecting something crummy and then it comes back on your face like that doesn't feel very good. So it's kind of a way to kind of get some more joy into your business and into your life is to really focus on the joy even just for little moments throughout the day.
Yeah. I love that. Real quick, what's something you would tell the leader who is excited about this conversation? They're already doing some of this work. What's something you would leave with them to maybe propel them forward a little bit more, even?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so great that you're on this journey. You've been, exploring things that you're seeing this as a world of possibilities. And I think that the more that you can continue to do that and to continue to reflect on everything that's good, the more you can reflect on and show gratitude for all of the things that are good. I think it will just continue to propel you forward. And I think that you're on the precipice of something really innovative if you've already been doing this work. So don't give up if you're not
Yes.
seeing results immediately.
Yes.
It's more about, just keep on keeping on and, be open to the prosperity and to the opportunities that come. And then sometimes we tend to not see that, as much as we can focus on good stuff, sometimes we're not seeing the opportunities that are out there. So I would also encourage you to look closer at all of the relationships and the people that you have in your life and see if there's maybe more to it than that.
Yeah. I like to call what you're referring to patient diligence.
Yeah, oh, I
Patient
like that.
diligence. Yeah. Yeah. Diligence every day. Patience. And alignment. You referred to alignment earlier, and that's exactly what you're talking about there at the end. So this is great, Jen. I've loved this conversation. Been amazing. Lots of really great stuff in there that you've shared. Okay, to finish out the show, something I love to do, 5 questions, kind of a speed rapid round. One word
Okay.
answers only. One word answers only. Okay, are you ready? Regarding books, do you prefer digital or paper?
Paper,
Coffee or tea?
coffee.
What's one guilty pleasure that you have?
I don't know.
This
No.
always gets people.
Uh, yeah, I like TV.
TV? Yeah, yeah. One thing that you can't live without.
I mean, my husband.
Yeah, awesome. And what's your favorite season of the year? You're in Portland, Oregon. You have a few
Summer,
options. Right.
the one that's not raining. That's always my
Anyone,
favorite
yeah,
season.
anyone in the Pacific Northwest, it's like, just give me sun. Please give me sun.
That's right.
Jen, again, this has been amazing. Thank you for coming on the Mitch Gray Show. You've given the listeners, the audience, some great inspiration and some great information as well. So, brothers and sisters, thank you for listening to the Mitch Gray Show. Thank you for joining us today in our conversation with Jen. All of her social media platform connections and her website will be in the show notes. So make sure you go check those out on either our website, mitchgraymedia.com, or our podcast. So make sure you connect with her and make sure you subscribe to the Mitch Gray Show anywhere you listen to podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of our episodes are also via video on our YouTube channel. So multiple ways to check us out. Jen, would you like to tell the people, are you totally rebranding your podcast while I'm thinking about it, or can they go subscribe still?
Oh yeah, you can totally subscribe, and it's the Women Conquer Business podcast.
Okay, perfect. So go check that out, Women Conquer Business Podcast. I know you're going to be kicking off a new season soon, and maybe we'll do, even though I'm not a woman conquering business, we could still do a show swap, and I could still help women conquer business. I love it.
That's
Hey,
right.
I raised 2 girls, so I did something right. So awesome. Jen, thank you again. This has been awesome. And brothers and sisters, we hope that you are at a place in life that you can find some peace if you're in a leadership role. Please consider empathy, compassion, and vulnerability. And if you need any support with that, please reach out to Jen or myself. And we mentioned mental health earlier, and I like to mention it as much as possible. As one who deals with mental health and depression, please know that someone is there for you. You're not alone. We're here to help you. Even if it's not a mental health issue, if you need any support whatsoever, the world is full of amazing people like Jen who are willing to help you and willing to work with you in any way that we possibly can. So please reach out, please connect with us, and we will see you next time.